Beneath the veneer of daily life, simmering resentments and long-held secrets can reach a terrifying boiling point. What happens when betrayal shatters the illusion of normalcy, unleashing a meticulously planned vengeance that transcends the grave? In the sterile confines of a correctional facility, a seemingly professional nurse, driven by a dark past and current heartbreak, began to orchestrate a macabre symphony of manipulation, setting the stage for a crime that would dismantle multiple lives, even her own. This is the story of how a tangled web of infidelity, ambition, and a twisted desire for control led to a chilling act, leaving behind a trail of broken lives and a mystery that would push two seasoned detectives to their absolute limits. A correctional officer, Officer Flynn, stepped into the infirmary at Ironwood Penitentiary, the heavy steel door groaning slightly before settling shut behind him. Alara Vance, seated at her desk, offered him a friendly, almost disarming smile, which seemed to catch him off guard, making him avert his gaze, a faint blush creeping up his neck. She was accustomed to this particular reaction. It was rare to find many women, and even rarer to encounter one as striking as Alara, working within the stark, male-dominated environment of Ironwood. The guards often developed harmless, if somewhat awkward, infatuations. Clearing his throat with an audible rasp, Officer Flynn announced, "Got someone here for a routine checkup, Nurse Vance." He paused, a flicker of genuine concern crossing his features. "He's a recent transfer, Mateo Sanchez. Word on the yard is he's got pretty deep ties to some notorious street crews. You want me to stick around while you see him?" Alara's smile widened just a fraction, a quiet confidence radiating from her. "Thanks for the offer, Officer Flynn, but I can certainly handle myself. I've dealt with far tougher cases and more volatile personalities than a fresh-faced transfer." The guard gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, a hint of admiration in his eyes. "All right, Nurse Vance," he said, his voice a little softer now, and then he stepped back out into the echoing corridor. Moments later, he reappeared, escorting a young Latino man in standard prison attire, who clutched a warm manila folder in one hand. "Sit," the guard barked, his tone regaining its usual authoritative edge, indicating a chair opposite Alara's desk. "And you will show some respect. You cause any trouble for her, you deal with me." "Got it." The inmate, Mateo Sanchez, offered no verbal response, his dark, intense gaze already fixed intently on Alara, scanning her with an unsettling intensity. Once the infirmary door clicked shut, leaving them in a charged silence, Alara rose calmly, turning the lock on the door with a deliberate click. She then extended a hand for the folder, which Mateo relinquished slowly. Flipping it open, she began to read aloud, her voice clear and even. "Mateo Sanchez, age 19. Is that accurate, Mr. Sanchez?" He gave her a slow, lingering once over, his eyes traveling from her face to her uniform, before finally replying with a brazen smirk, "Yes, beautiful. Every detail." Alara Vance expertly ignored the familiar, suggestive tone. "I'm Nurse Vance," she stated coolly, her gaze unwavering. "I'll be in charge of your medical care while you are housed here at Ironwood Penitentiary." She then began her review of his health history, posing a series of basic, routine questions. Mateo answered half-heartedly, his attention clearly more fixed on observing her than on providing coherent responses. "It says here you have type 1 diabetes and require daily insulin injections. Is that correct?" When he nodded lazily, his eyes still exploring her, she continued, "All right, then let's get that handled immediately." She moved with practiced efficiency to the mini fridge in the corner, retrieved a sterile syringe pre-filled with the necessary dose, and returned to the desk. "Lift your shirt, Please, so I can access your abdomen for the injection. Of course, sweetheart, he purred, a predatory glint in his eyes. Or I could take the whole thing off for you, give you a much better view, if that's what you prefer. That won't be necessary, Mr. Sanchez, she replied, her voice an icy calm, entirely devoid of emotion. Without any further delay or preamble, she administered the injection swiftly and precisely. After discarding the used syringe into a sharps container, she turned back toward him, crossing her arms over her chest, her expression now hard and unyielding. Mr. Sanchez, you need to adjust your tone and your behavior immediately. This is not some street corner hangout, nor is it a casual social club. This is a correctional facility, a place of discipline and order. I am a nurse, a medical professional, not merely your flirt of the day. You will refer to me as Nurse Vance, and you will treat me with full and unwavering respect. Is that perfectly clear? He responded with a mischievous, almost defiant grin, licking his lips slowly, an exaggerated, taunting gesture. You can give me shots, sure, but I know how to give a woman a good time. I can make women smile, believe me. To his immediate shock, Elara Vance returned his leer with a thin, unsettlingly cold smile of her own. Mr. Sanchez, she purred, her voice deceptively soft. Are you absolutely certain I administered the correct dose? Are you entirely sure it was even insulin? His confident grin slowly, visibly, evaporated from his face. Next time you request pain medication, she continued, her voice now like a shard of ice, cutting through the silence. Are you sure I'll provide you with the correct pills? Or perhaps when it's time for your annual flu vaccine, have you considered what an air bubble in your veins can do if it reaches your heart? Now, clearly and visibly uncomfortable, Mateo Sanchez instinctively recoiled slightly. His arrogant smirk entirely vanished. Elara Vance took a deliberate step forward, her tone dropping to a low, razor-sharp whisper that was far more menacing than a shout. I possess the capability to utterly ruin your life from this side of the counter, Mr. Sanchez, in ways you cannot even begin to comprehend or imagine. So, if you harbor any desire to survive your incarceration here without swiftly becoming another forgotten statistic in these walls, you will show me the proper and absolute respect I deserve. Is that understood? He finally averted his eyes, the defiance completely drained from them. Yes, ma'am. In English, Mr. Sanchez, she snapped, her eyes narrowing. He swallowed hard, his throat bobbing. Yes, ma'am. Yes, Nurse Vance. She gave a slow, satisfied nod, a silent acknowledgement of his capitulation. Good. Now, you may go ask Officer Flynn to escort you back to your unit. I have a substantial amount of paperwork to finalize. When Officer Flynn returned to escort Mateo Sanchez out, he cast a curious, questioning glance at Elara Vance, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Everything all right, Nurse Vance? She offered him a bright, almost excessively sweet smile, her composure perfectly restored. Just fine, officer. Mr. Sanchez behaved perfectly. They always do, in the end. Arthur Finch's quiet, focused concentration at his cubicle was abruptly shattered by the thunderous, uncoordinated steps of Leo Sterling barging into his small, personal space. Loud, brash, and annoyingly charismatic, Leo was the antithesis of everything Arthur Finch embodied. While Arthur valued the serene quiet and diligent cooperation within the office, Leo thrived on being the absolute center of attention, effortlessly drawing others into his orbit. This stark contrast only served to highlight Arthur Finch's own stagnating career and his persistent feeling of being overlooked. As Leo immediately launched into an enthusiastic, rapid-fire stream of the latest office gossip and absurd rumors, Arthur gritted his teeth, a vein throbbing faintly at his temple. Things escalated from bad to worse when Leo, with a casual disregard for personal boundaries, picked up a framed wedding photograph from Arthur's neatly organized desk. "Is this your wife, Arthur?" Leo exclaimed, holding the frame up for a better look. "Wow, she's absolutely gorgeous. How on earth did you manage to pull that off?" Arthur snapped, his patience finally snapping, yanking the precious photo away from Leo with an abrupt, jerky motion. "Leave that alone, Leo. It's personal." Surprised and momentarily chastened, Leo mumbled a quick, awkward excuse about not meaning any harm, and then, sensing the deep-seated anger, swiftly retreated from the cubicle. Arthur slumped heavily back into his chair, his gaze fixed on the photograph of Serafina, his beautiful wife. A potent mixture of acute embarrassment and searing jealousy churned unpleasantly in his chest. Deep down, a persistent, gnawing insecurity always lingered. He felt Serafina was undeniably out of his league, a woman too vibrant and captivating for a man as unremarkable as himself. She had, miraculously, said yes to him once, years ago, but the constant, insidious fear of losing her never truly departed, especially with overtly confident and charming men like Leo Sterling constantly lurking nearby. Julian Blackwood, the esteemed principal of Oakwood Academy, meticulously divided his demanding days into two distinct, highly productive parts. His mornings were energetically spent walking the bustling halls, personally greeting students as they arrived, and managing the dynamic, often unpredictable rhythm of school life in person. The afternoons, by contrast, were markedly quieter, typically spent ensconced in the serene solitude of his spacious office, meticulously sorting through an endless barrage of emails, conducting important meetings with anxious parents, or diligently addressing staff-related matters. This well-structured system worked flawlessly. His performance reviews were consistently stellar, filled with glowing accolades, and the faint, exciting whispers of an imminent promotion to a district-level position had recently begun to circulate through the administrative offices. One particular Friday, just before the eagerly anticipated start of the spring break, he double-checked his schedule with his meticulous secretary, Ms. Davies. "Just one more appointment today, Mr. Blackwood." "Per your specific request," she replied, her fingers dancing expertly over her keyboard. "Perfect," Julian said, a subtle, anticipatory gleam in his eyes. He then added, with a seemingly casual magnanimity, "Feel free to depart early for the day if you'd like, Ms. Davies. You've earned it." Grateful for the unexpected reprieve, she readily agreed, gathering her belongings and leaving the office for the long weekend. Serafina, Thorne utterly adored teaching 6th grade. Her students were at a rare and fascinating stage of development, intellectually mature enough to grasp complex, abstract ideas, yet still possessing that precious, unspoiled innocence that allowed them to truly revel in the pure joy of learning. She watched their emotional growth with an almost parental fascination, particularly as the boys, with endearing clumsiness, began to notice the girls in their class. That afternoon, as she walked towards the principal's office, a secret, exhilarating flutter of anticipation danced in her heart. When she entered, Julian Blackwood was already standing, motioning her in with a welcoming, eager gesture. As soon as the office door clicked softly shut behind her, he moved swiftly, enveloping her in a passionate embrace and kissing her deeply, hungrily. She melted instantly under his fervent touch, the illicit thrill coursing through her veins, until the harsh, undeniable reality of their situation abruptly crashed in. "Julian, we can't." "Not here," she gasped, pulling away reluctantly, her breath coming in short, ragged bursts. "There's still people around in the building. Someone could see us. We have the entire week together at the conference, darling. Plenty of time then." Reluctantly, he released her, backing off a step, a flicker of frustration evident in his dark eyes. "You're absolutely right, my love," he conceded, his voice thick with unfulfilled desire. "But you had better be fully prepared for me in that hotel room." She smiled breathlessly, a delicious shiver running down her spine, then issued a final, whispered warning. "Go home and act perfectly normal. Be especially sweet to your wife, Ilara. And remember, Julian, absolutely no one can ever know about us." Before leaving, Serafina Thorne leaned in one last time, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to his lips, a kiss full of illicit longing and fervent promise. Later that night, Julian Blackwood found his wife, Ilara Vance, standing by the living room window, staring out into the deepening twilight, her shoulders visibly slumped, a profound sadness etched on her face. "What's wrong, Ilara, my dear?" he asked, his voice gentle with concern. "My sister, Lydia," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She called. "She's spiraling again, Julian." Lydia's life had been a tragic, relentless string of emotional breakdowns, desperate rehab attempts, and agonizing relapses into destructive behaviors. Ilara, despite her own emotional exhaustion, yearned desperately to help her, to pull her sister back from the brink. But Julian, pragmatic and weary of Lydia's perpetual crises, gently reminded her that they couldn't fix Lydia. Not until Lydia herself genuinely desired to be helped. The cycle was too familiar, too draining. "I'm so scared, Julian," Ilara admitted, tears finally spilling down her cheeks, her voice thick with raw vulnerability. "I'm terrified I'll end up just like her. Losing control, losing everything." "You won't, Ilara," Julian assured her, pulling her close, stroking her hair. "You are nothing like her. You are strong, capable, and resilient." Rachel, however, excused herself, her voice muffled, stating she wasn't hungry and needed to lie down. Julian sat alone in the quiet dining room, torn between a genuine surge of sympathy for his wife's enduring pain and a rising wave of personal frustration. Lydia was an unshakable ghost that continued to haunt their marriage, a dark cloud that perpetually overshadowed their attempts at happiness. He had eagerly anticipated spending some intimate, quality time with Ilara before he left town for the conference, but now she would be emotionally unreachable for days. Ironically, this sudden emotional distance made the prospect of his impending liaison with Serafina feel even less complicated, less fraught with guilt. As he reached for his phone to order a solitary dinner, he muttered under his breath, a sour note of self-pity in his voice, of all nights for Lydia to call and plunge her into despair. Arthur Finch stood framed in the bathroom doorway, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, a clear line of worry etched between his brows. "Do you truly have to attend that conference, Serafina?" he asked, his voice laced with an almost childish plea. "A whole week without you here?" Serafina Thorne meticulously rinsed her mouth, then turned toward him, a patient, reassuring smile on her lips. "Arthur, we've thoroughly discussed this multiple times. It's a genuinely important professional opportunity for me. I'll meet new, innovative educators, learn about fresh pedagogical approaches, and bring back a wealth of exciting, new ideas to invigorate my sixth-grade class." Arthur Finch sighed heavily, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I just don't particularly like the idea of you being away from home for such an extended period," he mumbled, his gaze fixed on the floor. "You travel all the time for your work, Arthur," she countered, offering a playful, teasing smile. "That's different," he muttered defensively, though she knew, with an almost weary certainty, what truly lay behind his persistent concern. Jealousy. He never articulated it aloud, but she could discern it clearly in the way his eyes tracked her every movement as she meticulously packed her suitcase. The unspoken fear of other men, other opportunities, hanging heavy in the air. To assuage his anxieties, Serafina leaned in close, her breath warm against his ear. "You'll genuinely miss me that much, huh?" she asked playfully, her tone light and inviting. He nodded, his expression softening despite himself. She pressed a warm, lingering kiss to his lips and whispered, her voice low and husky, "Then I suppose I'd better give you something truly memorable to remember me by while I'm gone." Serafina woke before dawn the following morning, too filled with exhilarating anticipation to return to sleep. She quietly made breakfast, ate her meal early, and meticulously planned to finish her packing while Arthur was distracted by his food downstairs, preoccupied with his usual morning routine. She had purchased something special specifically for the trip, a small indulgence she didn't want him to discover. Nothing inappropriate or scandalous, merely a personal item she preferred to keep private from his watchful eyes. As the enticing aroma of sizzling bacon drifted enticingly upstairs, Arthur eventually came down, rubbing sleep from his eyes, and greeted her. "My, you're really eager this morning, aren't you, Serafina?" Cece smiled brightly, trying to maintain a light, teasing atmosphere. "Blame last night, darling," she joked, a blush rising to her cheeks. She quickly cleared the breakfast dishes and informed him she was heading upstairs to complete her packing. Later, when she returned to the bedroom to retrieve a forgotten item, she was taken aback to find Arthur standing by her open suitcase, his hand clearly rummaging through its contents. "Seriously, Arthur," she said, placing her hands on her hips, a mixture of annoyance and disbelief in her voice. "I was just checking to see if you happened to forget anything important," he mumbled weakly, looking distinctly sheepish. "Arthur, I've been expertly packing my own bags for years now," she replied, a hint of exasperation in her tone. "Trust me, I'm perfectly capable." Embarrassed and caught red-handed, he quickly mumbled an apology and retreated from the room. Serafina shook her head, a complex blend of annoyance at his distrust and amusement at his transparent attempt to snoop. She then, just in case, meticulously tucked her special item deep into the very bottom of her makeup bag, ensuring it was out of sight and safe from any further prying eyes. That afternoon, Arthur, still looking a little forlorn, helped her carry her bags to the car. "Are you absolutely sure you have to go, Serafina?" he asked one last time, his voice heavy with reluctant resignation. "Arthur, we've gone over this countless times, haven't we?" she said firmly, leaning in to plant a swift, affectionate kiss on his cheek. "No more guilt trips, please." He managed a forced, strained smile in return. "Just stay out of trouble, okay, love?" She laughed, a light, carefree sound. "Arthur, it's a teacher's conference, not a raucous rock concert." Then, she gave a final wave and drove off, leaving him standing alone in the driveway. Once she was safely cruising down the highway, Serafina glanced into her rearview mirror. No sign of Arthur following, which was a relief. Still, she didn't want to risk a call that could be traced, so she sent a quick, discreet message to Julian with one hand still on the steering wheel, on the road. "Can't wait to see you. Miss you already." She hit send, then powered down her phone, tucking it away. Arthur certainly didn't need to be calling her every 10 minutes with his usual anxious check-ins. Back home, just moments later, Arthur's phone buzzed softly in his pocket. He smiled, his heart lifting slightly, assuming it was a sweet, final goodbye text from Serafina. But as he read the message, his heart plummeted a cold dread seeping into his chest. "I can't wait to see you. Miss you already." The words made absolutely no sense. She had literally just departed. Was it some kind of poorly timed joke? Or, far worse, a message intended for someone else entirely? His mind raced, a terrifying suspicion beginning to form. Could have been meant for Julian? Their names, he recalled with a sickening lurch, were right next to each other in her phone contacts. The very idea made his stomach churn with a bitter, acidic bile. He immediately tried to call her, but her phone was off. He left a terse, clipped voicemail, but carefully refrained from mentioning the baffling text. Perhaps he desperately hoped it was just a strange glitch, a momentary technological hiccup. Maybe. As the days slowly dragged on with no response from Serafina, his anxiety swelled, growing into an unbearable knot of apprehension. That evening, unable to bear the gnawing uncertainty any longer, he opened his laptop and compulsively searched for private investigators located near the conference center's hotel. "If she doesn't call by morning," he muttered aloud to the empty room, his voice hoarse with resolve, "I will find out the truth for myself, whatever it may be." Julian Blackwood was a coiled spring of restlessness, pacing the plush carpet of the hotel lobby with a nervous energy as he impatiently awaited Serafina Thorne's arrival. He didn't know her precise arrival time, but the deafening silence on her end, her phone powered down, made every passing minute feel like an eternity. He was acutely aware that waiting in such an exposed manner was inherently risky. If anyone associated with his professional circles saw them together, the mere whisper of rumors could utterly derail his promising career. Still, he found himself utterly unable to resist the pull. He was already far too deeply entangled, too profoundly committed. His heart gave a sudden, joyous leap when he finally spotted her, a vision of grace, walking through the grand entrance of the hotel. After a quick, hushed greeting and a brief, light exchange of pleasantries, he swiftly took her luggage, helping her discreetly towards her reserved room. They maintained a careful, professional distance in the elevator, acutely mindful of the other guests and their casual, observant glances. But once inside the privacy of her room, all pretense of restraint completely vanished. Julian Blackwood dropped her bags with a thud and pulled her into a fervent, desperate kiss, as though he hadn't seen her in years, as if a vast chasm had separated them. Serafina clung to him, just as eager, her body melting into his. But before their passion could escalate further, she gently, reluctantly, pushed him away. "Hang on a moment, Julian. Let me just check my phone," she said, her voice a little breathless. "I haven't turned it on since I left home. Arthur might have called. He's probably worried sick." Julian sighed, a sound of reluctant resignation, grudgingly giving her the space she requested as her phone slowly powered on. Serafina's eyes widened as the screen illuminated, revealing a cascade of missed calls. "He's been trying to reach me relentlessly since I left the house," she muttered, a frustrated sigh escaping her lips. "He's so incredibly insecure, Julian." Julian sat beside her on the edge of the bed as she stared at the glowing screen, the guilt palpable in the air. Her tone shifted, softening considerably. "I feel terrible, Julian. He genuinely does love me, even if he is unbelievably clingy and distrustful." She looked up at Julian, her eyes clouded with doubt. "I'm not sure we should be doing this anymore. What about Alara? What if someone finds out, Julian? Our lives would be destroyed." He nodded, deflated, his earlier excitement completely extinguished. "I've asked myself the very same questions, Serafina. I don't want to cause pain to anyone. I truly don't. But I can't stop thinking about you, about us." "I feel exactly the same way," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "But that doesn't make any of this right, Julian." It just doesn't. There was a heavy, pregnant pause between them. Then, quietly, almost imperceptibly, Julian said, "If you genuinely wish to stop this, Serafina, I will respect your decision. I will, no matter how much it hurts." Serafina gave him a soft, melancholic smile and reached out, gently touching his face, her fingertips tracing the line of his jaw. "You're a truly good man, Julian." But the moment lingered, charged with unspoken desires. One hesitant glance turned into another, then another kiss, softer this time, but no less potent. Emotions surged, raw and powerful. Boundaries, once firmly established, slowly faded into oblivion. And soon, they were locked in each other's arms again, lost completely in the intoxicating moment they had tried so hard and failed to resist. Any lingering thoughts of guilt or the fragile constraints of their consciences were left far behind, cast aside in the intoxicating rush of illicit passion. Monday morning, Arthur made a point of staying home late to make a highly private, discreet call. He contacted a local detective agency specializing in such delicate matters, and his voice low and strained, poured out his profound fears and suspicions. The woman on the other end of the line was remarkably calm and professional, her voice soothing. "Mr. Finch, your wife is attending a professional convention, correct? We already have a few other clients for whom we are discreetly monitoring that very event," she explained. "Give us a day or two, and we'll have a comprehensive report for you." This did little to assuage Arthur's anxieties. Knowing that others harbored the same chilling suspicions about their own spouses offered him cold, hollow comfort. Serafina hadn't returned any of his calls since she had left, which only served to add more fuel to his already raging worries. In the past, she had always been meticulous about checking in. Now, there was nothing. The silence hurt, a deep, aching wound, but a small, perverse part of him didn't truly want to hear from her. Not until he possessed the irrefutable truth. On Wednesday afternoon, his phone finally buzzed, a sharp, jarring vibration. It was the detective agency. "Mr. Finch," the voice on the other end of the line began, its tone sympathetic but firm. "I am truly sorry to inform you, but we have confirmed your suspicions. We obtained undeniable photographs and irrefutable evidence. I've just sent the complete file to your email address." Arthur was utterly speechless, the breath knocked out of him. "Would you like us to continue monitoring her activities, Mr. Finch?" she inquired gently. "No," he said flatly, his voice devoid of all emotion. "That's quite enough. Thank you." She hesitated for a moment, sensing the profound impact of her words. "Please don't act rashly, Mr. Finch. Many couples have managed to recover from situations like this, however difficult. Just take some time to process this, to think things through." He abruptly ended the call, and the crushing weight of the revelation finally broke through his carefully constructed composure. He wept quietly, hiding himself in a secluded corner of his home office, utterly ashamed and deeply shattered. Eventually, with a Herculean effort, he pulled himself together, forcing himself to leave early, fabricating an excuse about feeling unwell. Once he arrived home, he went straight to his computer, his hands trembling slightly, and opened the email. It took only a few gut-wrenching images to confirm everything he had feared, everything he had dreaded. Arthur rushed to the nearest bathroom, his stomach churning, and violently vomited. Afterward, he lay on the cold, unforgiving tile floor, utterly drained, his body heavy with despair. Later, he collapsed onto the living room couch, pressing a hand over his eyes, desperately attempting to shut out the horrifying truth, but the vivid, incriminating images were indelibly burned into his mind. What he had witnessed was undeniable. His marriage was irrevocably over. Arthur sat motionless on the couch, his mind a chaotic whirlwind, desperately trying to collect his scattered thoughts. Perhaps it was for the best that Serafina wasn't home. He didn't trust what he might do if he saw her face to face. Or Julian. But then Alara, Julian's wife, came to mind, a sharp, sudden pang of sympathy hitting him. She had adored her husband, idealized him, even. This revelation would utterly destroy her. A strange, vindictive sense of justice flickered within him. She deserves to know, he told himself, trying to rationalize the vengeful impulse. If the roles were reversed, he reasoned, I would certainly want the truth, no matter how painful. Still, a darker, more primitive part of him took a morbid satisfaction in imagining Julian facing the full, humiliating fallout of his actions. He rose, moved to his printer, and printed the incriminating evidence photos from the private investigator's file. Then, with a deep, shaky breath, he dialed the Blackwoods' home number. To his surprise, Alara answered. Arthur, his voice tense, explained that he urgently needed to speak with her in person. She hesitated, a note of puzzled curiosity in her voice, but ultimately agreed. When he arrived at their elegant, quiet home, Alara welcomed him in, her expression still clearly puzzled. You've certainly got me curious. Arthur, what on earth could be so urgent? Now, face to face with her, a flicker of doubt assailed Arthur. Their families had shared pleasant dinners occasionally, exchanged holiday greetings, but they were by no means intimately close friends. Still, he couldn't back out now. The truth, however painful, had to be delivered. Alara, I'm truly sorry, he began, his voice strained. There's no easy way to say this. My wife, Serafina, and your husband, Julian, they're having an affair. Alara's eyes widened, a slow dawning horror spreading across her face, but she remained utterly silent, rooted to the spot. Arthur, his resolve hardening, pulled out the printed photos, fanning them out like a gruesome deck of cards. I hired someone to follow them. They were together at a conference. These are the pictures. Suddenly, a raw, guttural cry escaped Alara. Her legs buckled beneath her, and she collapsed to the floor in a crumpled heap, breaking into gut-wrenching sobs. Arthur rushed to her side, kneeling beside her. Alara, we'll get through this, he said gently, trying to offer what little comfort he could. You don't understand, she choked out through her tears, her voice ragged with despair. My father, he cheated on my mother. She couldn't take the betrayal, the humiliation. She ended her life, Arthur. She took her own life because of it. Her words hung in the air, heavy with tragedy. My sister, Lydia, spiraled completely after that. She disappeared for years, living on the streets, bouncing between rehab institutions. She was never, ever the same. And now it's happening to me. It's all happening again. Arthur was stunned into horrified silence, the magnitude of her past trauma crashing down on him. I'm so incredibly sorry, Alara, he whispered, genuinely aghast. But this isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. Alara, however, suddenly turned on him, her eyes blazing with an almost manic fury. It is your fault, Arthur. You didn't control your wife. If you had truly managed her, none of this, absolutely none of this, would ever have happened. He reeled back, shocked by the sudden, irrational accusation. That's not fair, Alara, he protested, his voice rising. Oh, please, she spat, a sneer twisting her lips. Defending her? How utterly pathetic. The entire town will soon know what an absolute joke you are, Arthur Finch. Google your name. They'll see loser plastered next to your face. Her words cut deep, slicing through his already fragile composure. Arthur stood frozen, utterly shocked by the intensity of her venomous fury. Then, a chilling sound escaped her lips, a laugh. A sound so unhinged, so devoid of sanity, that it genuinely frightened him to his core. Grabbing the incriminating photos, he instinctively backed away, his gaze fixed on her erratic movements, and then rushed frantically to his car, her horrifying laughter echoing relentlessly in his head as he sped away into the night. Back home, Arthur was still severely rattled. That wasn't just anger, he thought, pacing his living room in a cold sweat. That was dangerous, truly dangerous. Worse, what if Alara, in her deranged state, started broadcasting this sordid tale to everyone at his office? The humiliation, the professional ruin, would be utterly unbearable. He desperately tried to call Serafina again. Still no answer. Furious, he left a raw, unhinged message on her voicemail. "Serafina, get back here now. I know everything. Alara knows, too. I have the pictures. Call me back unless you're too busy cheating your life away." With nothing else to do, nowhere else to turn, he grabbed a dusty bottle of whiskey from the back of the cabinet and drank until the world mercifully blurred and he finally passed out on the sofa. The next morning, hungover and consumed by a cold, clammy anxiety, he debated staying home, hiding from the world. But a deep-seated instinct for survival, for maintaining some semblance of normalcy, forced him into the office. No one acted differently, no whispers, no knowing glances, but Serafina still hadn't called back. He didn't have Julian's number, and calling Alara was unequivocally out of the question. He felt trapped, suffocating in a self-made prison of his own making. That night, he returned to a messy, desolate house and a mind brimming with dread. He would call a lawyer first thing in the morning. At the conference, Serafina had been clinging to Julian a little too closely, their chemistry undeniable, almost brazen. "Good thing I don't really know anyone here," she thought with a nervous flutter in her stomach, trying to quell the rising tide of guilt. More than a few attendees had noticed their palpable connection. Some had even openly remarked on what a cute couple they made. On Thursday night, they attended a lavish dinner hosted by Horizon Publishing Gala. After consuming a generous amount of free drinks and dancing with reckless abandon, they stumbled back to her hotel room, flushed with alcohol and giddy with illicit pleasure. "Hang on a moment," she murmured, breathless, as she fumbled with her room key. "I have something special for you tonight." While Julian lounged provocatively on the bed, his eyes fixed on her, Serafina slipped into the opulent bathroom. She changed quickly, emerging a few minutes later in a daring, risque black and red lingerie set, deliberately chosen for this secret rendezvous. As she adjusted the straps of her delicate high heels, she noticed her purse, which she had carelessly tossed onto the vanity, had spilled open. Her phone, nestled among lipstick and loose change, was off. A wave of profound guilt surged through her as she turned it on, the screen immediately filling with a daunting list of missed calls. When she finally listened to Arthur's furious, desperate voicemail, a strangled scream escaped her lips. Julian, startled by the sudden noise, knocked gently on the bathroom door. "Serafina, darling, is everything all right in there?" She flung the door open, her face pale with shock and fear, and handed him the phone. His face, in turn, drained of all color as he listened to Arthur's scathing message. "We're in serious, serious trouble, Serafina," he whispered, his voice hoarse with dread. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring her vision. "We have to leave first thing in the morning, Julian. We can't stay here another minute." He nodded grimly. "Agreed. We've both had far too much to drink tonight anyway. We need clear heads for this." As he attempted to comfort her, his hands, driven by instinct, began to wander over her body. But Serafina abruptly pushed him away, a sharp edge to her voice. Seriously, Julian? Our lives are literally falling apart, and that's what you're thinking about right now. I just want to be close to you, Serafina, he insisted, a pleading note in his voice. Well, not tonight, she snapped, pulling a loose hotel robe around her. I'm sleeping in the other bed. Don't even think about sneaking over, Julian. The air between them, once charged with passion, turned cold and thick with unspoken tension, the harsh reality of their impending exposure settling in like a heavy shroud. By the time Julian and Serafina hit the road early Thursday afternoon, they were both utterly hung over and emotionally exhausted. They'd overslept, packed hastily in a panic scramble, and grabbed a quick, unappetizing brunch through room service because Serafina was too distraught and ashamed to face anyone in the hotel restaurant. Guilt consumed her, a gnawing, relentless force, not just for her infidelity, but for the profound public embarrassment she knew Arthur would undoubtedly face when the truth inevitably spread. We have to keep this quiet, Julian, for all our sakes, she said through choked sobs, tears streaming down her face. Julian, despite his own turmoil, tried to offer what little comfort he could. Arthur loves you, Serafina. This will undoubtedly hurt him deeply, but he might just forgive you eventually. Even if he doesn't, he can file for divorce quietly. There's no need for a massive scandal. We can avoid that. Serafina nodded weakly, the very talk of divorce making her break down in fresh tears. After a while, her voice barely a whisper, she asked, "What about Alara? How will she cope?" Julian hesitated, running a hand through his hair. It'll absolutely devastate her. Her parents' painful split really scarred her deeply. But maybe that's precisely why she won't want to go through it herself. Perhaps it will make her more amenable to an amicable solution. Then he looked her directly in the eye, his gaze intense, desperate. I don't want to lose you, Serafina. I mean that with all my heart. Serafina looked away, unable to meet his gaze. I can't answer that right now, Julian. We just need to get home and face this. In the hotel parking lot, Julian insisted on following her back to her house. I need to make sure you're safe, Serafina, he urged, his voice filled with concern. Julian, no. Don't, she pleaded, her voice rising in panic. Arthur will absolutely flip if he sees you there. It will only make things worse. I'm not letting him hurt you, Serafina, he stated, his jaw set. If he hits me, fine. I deserve it for what I've done. And with that, they drove off, Serafina's car leading, Julian's close behind, an uneasy convoy heading towards an inevitable confrontation. Arthur had gone into work that morning, a futile attempt at normalcy. But when Serafina texted him that she was finally coming home, he immediately left early, his stomach churning with dread and anticipation. Hours later, when she finally pulled into the driveway, Julian's car following closely behind her, his carefully controlled temper exploded into a raw, unbridled fury. What is he doing here? He bellowed, his voice cracking with rage. Julian, calmly ignoring Arthur's outburst, retrieved Serafina's bags from the trunk and followed her up the steps towards the front door. I'm not hiding from you, Arthur, Julian stated, his voice steady despite the tension. I needed to make absolutely sure Serafina was safe. Arthur, overwhelmed by the sight of them together, by the sheer audacity of Julian's presence, stepped aside, his body rigid, allowing them both inside the house. They sat in a thick, suffocating silence in the living room for what felt like an eternity before Serafina finally spoke, her voice tearful and trembling. Arthur, I am so deeply sorry. I never, ever meant for any of this to happen. I truly didn't think you would find out. Arthur snapped, his control completely gone. Sorry for what, precisely, Serafina? Sorry for this. He tossed the private investigator's incriminating photos onto the coffee table, scattering them like fallen leaves. Julian's face went pale, a ghostly white. Serafina immediately broke down into fresh, wrenching sobs. Arthur felt a fleeting flicker of cold justice, a grim satisfaction, until Julian, regaining some composure, asked, his voice low and dangerous, "Have you shown these to anyone else, Arthur?" Arthur, now defensive and wary, barked back, "Not yet. I wanted to hear from her first. I wanted the truth from her." Julian seized the opening. "Arthur, don't destroy everything over one mistake. I'm the one who truly crossed the line here. Serafina, she just got caught in the moment in a lapse of judgment. But she genuinely loves you, Arthur. She truly wants to fix this. Don't punish her for my actions." Arthur hesitated, a sliver of desperate hope piercing through his rage. Part of him, a deeply vulnerable part, desperately wanted to believe it. If he forgave her, perhaps they could keep this sordid affair private. Go to counseling. Pretend it had never, ever happened. He turned to Serafina, his voice hoarse with the effort of holding back his emotions. Would you go to therapy with me, Serafina? Stay loyal? Never see Julian again?" Serafina hesitated, her gaze darting from Julian to the floor, her silence a damning answer. And that, for Arthur, was all the confirmation he needed. "You're in love with him, aren't you?" Just then, the doorbell shrilled, a jarring intrusion. Arthur, his mind reeling, answered it, and Alara Vance stormed inside, her eyes wide with a manic fury, her hair disheveled. "I knew it," she shrieked, her voice laced with hysteria. "All three of you, scheming together, plotting behind my back." "Alara, please," Serafina tried to explain, her voice pleading. "You lying, manipulative hussy." Alara screamed, her hand flashing out, connecting with a brutal punch that sent Serafina sprawling to the floor. Chaos erupted instantly. Julian quickly grabbed Alara, trying desperately to restrain her, to prevent her from lashing out further. She kicked him hard in the shin, a sharp, precise blow. As he dropped to one knee, wincing in pain, she stood over him, her face livid, contorted with rage. "You ruined my life, Julian. You knew exactly what my family went through. You knew about my mother, about Lydia, and you still did this to me. I'll make absolutely sure everyone knows. No one will ever hire either of you again. I'll show the entire town those photos, Arthur. Every single person will see them." That chilling threat snapped Arthur out of his dazed shock. "Alara, calm down," he shouted, stepping forward cautiously. "Let's talk this through reasonably." "Talk," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "Your wife chased after mine like a dog in heat, Arthur, and you clearly couldn't satisfy her, could you? Everyone's going to laugh at you, Arthur. Just Google your name. They'll see loser next to your face." She paused, her eyes gleaming with a terrible, unholy satisfaction. "I need my rest now. Tomorrow, I start systematically tearing down both your pathetic careers." She turned her wild gaze to Julian. "Come home, Julian, and I'll have you arrested for what you did to me. I swear it." Then, with a final, chilling glare, she spun on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind her with a resounding crash that echoed through the stunned house. The room was plunged into a heavy, suffocating silence. Serafina, still on the floor, whispered, her voice trembling. She looked like she wanted to hurt me really, really badly. Arthur muttered, his voice cold and grim, "She might still. Someone has to stop her." Julian, shaken to his core, said, "I've never, ever seen her like this before. She might be having some kind of complete breakdown. She was like that when I told her." Arthur said coldly, his eyes fixed on Julian. "You told her?" Julian shouted, his face contorted in disbelief and fury. "Why would you do that, you absolute bastard? Why did you sleep with my wife, Arthur?" Arthur roared back, the room exploding into another furious shouting match until he finally snapped, his voice cracking with exhaustion and despair. "I want you both out of my house. Julian, go anywhere you want. I don't care. Serafina, you stay. I'll leave for tonight. And if Julian shows up here tonight, so help me God, I swear." He stormed out, leaving the three of them alone, broken and utterly unsure of what terrifying consequences would follow. After her explosive, terrifying scene at Arthur Finch's house, Alara Vance collapsed on her opulent living room couch, the sheer emotional and physical drain causing her to fall into a fitful, shallow sleep. It was late, perhaps the eerie middle of the night, when the faint, hesitant footsteps on the porch jolted her violently awake, half-dazed and still simmering with a dangerous, righteous anger. She immediately assumed it was Julian Blackwood, her treacherous husband, attempting to sneak back into the house, perhaps hoping to avoid further confrontation. She yanked the door open with a surge of furious energy, but instead of her husband's familiar face, she was met with the cold, unblinking barrel of a Magnum revolver, glinting menacingly in the faint porch light. The first impact landed squarely between her eyes, a sickening thud. She collapsed instantly, her body crumpling to the floor without a sound. 3 more impacts followed in rapid succession, muffled thumps against her already lifeless form, but Alara Vance felt none of them. The rookie cop, Officer Miller, had nearly lost his breakfast when he first laid eyes on Alara's brutally murdered body, the scene chilling him to the core. But he had, with impressive effort, regained his composure by the time the lead detectives arrived on the scene. From across the quiet, suburban street, a man and a woman approached, their voices a low, constant murmur of bickering, which somehow carried on the still night air. "Who are they, Sergeant?" the rookie asked, his voice still a little tight. "Those are Detectives Harding and Miller," his sergeant said, flipping open his notebook. "We affectionately call them the odd couple. They argue constantly, bicker like an old married pair, but damn it, they solve cases with uncanny precision, like clockwork." Leo and Tess reached the porch, their faces grim despite their earlier banter. "What have we got, Sergeant?" Leo asked, his gaze sweeping over the scene. The sergeant consulted his notes. "Victim is Alara Vance, age 36. Appears to have been hit once directly in the head, then 3 more times in the chest and lower body. Looks like the time of death was roughly 2 a.m. No immediate signs of forced entry or robbery. Her purse was dumped out on the floor, but nothing appears to be missing." Tess murmured, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "Sounds personal, very personal." "Nothing usable on the weapon prints yet, Detective," the sergeant added, anticipating their next question. "Forensics will double-check everything, of course." "Did anyone hear anything suspicious?" Leo asked, his eyes scanning the quiet neighborhood. A neighbor across the street thought it was just fireworks, a late-night celebration. The sergeant replied, shrugging. "Where's the husband?" "Julian Blackwood." Tess inquired, her gaze fixed on the empty driveway. "Not here. Looks like he hasn't been around for days. Maybe even since before the murder." "Run her phone records, Tess," Leo said decisively. "He's likely in there, or at least he'll be in her call history." They conducted a quick, methodical walkthrough of the quiet, blood-stained house, then headed to the urban bistro for a much-needed coffee and to discuss their initial findings. "Let me guess, Leo," Tess said, stirring her cereal, her eyes fixed on him over the rim of her coffee cup. "You're going to say it was the husband, aren't you?" "Classic case." Leo smirked, taking a slow sip of his own coffee. Dead wife, missing spouse, a fatal wound to the head from a close-range shot. Of course it was him. It's practically textbook. You haven't even met him yet, Leo. Tess scoffed, rolling her eyes. Besides, it's QED, not Q, whatever it still stands, though. Leo countered with a dismissive wave. Midway through their second cup, Leo's phone buzzed with an incoming call. They found Julian Blackwood, he announced, rising from the booth. At a motel off the highway, the Lakeside Inn. Let's go. A patrolman stood vigilant watch outside the motel room when detectives Harding and Miller arrived. Tess knocked sharply on the door. Julian Blackwood opened it, looking groggy from sleep but otherwise alert, his eyes weary. Mr. Blackwood, we need to talk to you about your wife, Ilera, Leo said, stepping inside and taking a seat on the edge of the motel room's single armchair. I checked in last night around 9 p.m., Julian explained, his voice even though a hint of nervousness was apparent in his fidgeting hands. I just watched some television, went to bed alone. You can verify that with the front desk staff. They'll confirm my check-in time. Why didn't you go home, Mr. Blackwood? Tess asked, her voice calm but probing, her gaze unwavering. Julian shifted uncomfortably. Ilera and I had a rather heated argument. I figured some space, a night apart, might help cool things down. What precisely was the fight about, Mr. Blackwood? Leo pressed, leaning forward slightly. She wanted me to come home early from a work conference I was attending. I simply couldn't leave my responsibilities. She became quite upset, quite emotional about it. Did either of you become physical during this argument? Tess inquired, her pen poised over her notebook. No, detectives. Just words. Nothing more. Walk me through your night leading up to checking in here, Mr. Blackwood, Leo prompted. I followed a colleague, Serafina Thorne, home from a convention to ensure she arrived safely. Okay. I stopped in briefly to say hello to her and her husband, Arthur, at their house. Ilera then unexpectedly showed up there. We had another argument, quite a public one. After that, I left, grabbed a quick dinner, and then came directly here to the motel. Describe your marriage with Ilera. Mr. Blackwood, Tess asked, changing tack. It had its ups and downs, like most marriages, I suppose. Normal, mostly. Do you own a Magnum revolver, Mr. Blackwood? Leo asked, his voice sharp. No, Julian said quickly, almost too quickly, his eyes darting away. Leo stood, signaling the end of the initial questioning. That's it for now, Mr. Blackwood. Please don't leave town without informing us. Once outside, Leo muttered, his voice low, he's definitely hiding something, Tess. Yeah, Tess agreed, though her brow was furrowed in thought. Not necessarily guilt, though, just fear. A profound fear of something. Leo grinned, a glint in his eye. I'll take that dinner bet now, Tess. As soon as the detectives left, Julian called Serafina. Julian, I just heard about Ilera, she exclaimed, her voice frantic, filled with a mixture of shock and terror. Listen, Serafina, he cut in, his voice urgent, overriding her panicked rambling. The police were just here, questioning me. I told them we had an argument at your place, but that's all I admitted. They're probably headed to you and Arthur next. You've absolutely got to get him to cooperate now. We need a united front. He hates me, Julian, she cried, desperation creeping into her voice. Why on earth would he ever help me now, after what I've done? Because public humiliation and career ruin are the absolute last things Arthur wants, Julian retorted, his voice firm. You know how to play this, Serafina. You've always been good at handling him. Serafina exhaled a long, shaky breath. I'll try, Julian. I promise. Good. We cannot afford a scandal right now. Not for any of us. A tense pause stretched between them. Julian, Serafina's voice was barely a whisper, filled with a new, terrifying implication. Did you liquidate her? No, he snapped, his voice sharp with revulsion. God, no, Serafina. Don't even think that. Don't ever suggest that again. I didn't think so, she said, though a tremor was in her voice. But she hated you so much, I just had to ask. Forget it. Just focus on Arthur. We're in this together, Serafina. Remember that. When detectives Leo and Tess arrived at the Finch home, Arthur and Serafina greeted them at the door, their faces pale and strained, a palpable tension in the air. After brief introductions, Leo got straight to the point, his demeanor all business. You two were friends with the Blackwoods, correct? Julian and Alara. Arthur answered carefully, choosing his words with deliberate precision. Like most couples, they had some arguments like any marriage. But nothing alarming, nothing that seemed out of the ordinary, at least to our knowledge. We heard they had a fight here yesterday, Leo continued, his eyes unwavering. Were you both present during that altercation? Arthur hesitated, glancing quickly at Serafina. Yes, detectives. What was the nature of the argument? Serafina quickly jumped in, eager to steer the narrative. Nothing major, detective. Alara simply missed Julian. She became quite emotional, a bit upset about him being away. Leo glanced down at his notes, then back at them. Was Alara already here when you returned from the convention? Serafina? No, Arthur replied, almost too quickly. She showed up later. Did either of you call her to come over? Leo pressed. No, I guess she just figured we'd be back home. Serafina interjected smoothly, her voice a little too quick, a little too rehearsed. Did Julian and Alara leave together after the argument then? Leo asked, his gaze fixed on Arthur. No, separate cars. Arthur replied, his voice flat. So, you two were here together for the remainder of the night? Another tense, agonizing pause. Then Serafina, her shoulders slumping in defeat, finally admitted, no, we argued too. Arthur spent the night at a motel. Leo raised a single eyebrow, a silent acknowledgement of the new, crucial information. So, to be clear, neither of you can account for the other's whereabouts during the precise time of Alara Vance's murder. They looked at each other, a silent, panicked exchange, before Arthur finally muttered, his voice barely audible. No, detectives. But we had absolutely nothing to do with it. We swear. Leo stood, signaling the end of the interview. All right, we'll be in touch. Once in the car, Tess scowled, her expression one of utter disbelief. That was it, Leo. They were practically sweating through their clothes with nerves. Their story was full of holes. Leo smirked, a knowing glint in his eye. Exactly, Tess. They've clearly rehearsed this performance. Let's allow them to think they've successfully fooled us. Then we'll split them up and watch their carefully constructed stories fall completely apart, piece by piece. Arthur paced the living room, a nervous wreck. That fabricated story won't hold up, Serafina. They're going to catch us, I just know it. No, Arthur. They believed us. Serafina insisted, her voice shrill with desperation. We just need to stay consistent, that's all. Arthur scoffed, turning to her, his eyes blazing with accusation. You're bending over backwards to protect Julian, the guy who probably pulled the trigger on Alara. No way, Serafina snapped, though a flicker of doubt, a momentary crack in her resolve, betrayed her. If you didn't do it, Arthur, maybe you did. Arthur froze, then fired back, his own voice rising. Or maybe you did, Serafina. You care more about your precious public image than anyone, don't you? Arthur sank into a chair, running a hand through his hair. This is a complete disaster. But after what we just told the police, we're forced to keep living together, at least until this whole ugly mess blows over. You'll be in the guest room, and my door stays locked. Understand? Leo grinned as he hung up the phone. Arthur's on his way in, Tess. Didn't sound particularly thrilled about it. Tess nodded, already preparing the interrogation room. Good. This time, let me question him alone. I think it might loosen him up a bit. Get him to talk. Leo rolled his eyes, a playful exasperation in his voice. Fine, Tess. Go with your gut, as always. In the sterile, quiet interrogation room, Tess greeted Arthur gently, her voice soft and empathetic. Mr. Finch, I know this entire situation can't be easy for you. It must be incredibly difficult. He nodded, clearly strained, his shoulders hunched. What's your general impression of Julian Blackwood, Mr. Finch? Tess asked, her voice maintaining its calm, steady tone. Arthur squirmed uncomfortably in his chair. I don't know him particularly well, Detective. But you trusted him enough to allow your wife to travel with him to a conference, didn't you? Tess observed, a subtle probe. Arthur remained silent, unable to respond. Tess deftly shifted topics. You mentioned that you and Serafina had a fight after the Blackwoods left your house yesterday. What was that argument truly about, Arthur? What was the actual cause of the conflict? Arthur's eyes welled up with tears, his composure rapidly crumbling. Tess watched quietly as he broke down, offering him a box of tissues and a few calm, reassuring words. Eventually, the dam broke, and Arthur poured out everything. The devastating affair, his decision to hire the private detective, the bitter fight with Serafina, the explosive fallout with Alara. I can't let anyone find out about this. Detective Miller, he begged, his voice raw with desperation. My career, my entire life, it would be utterly over. I'd be ruined. Tess noted, with a detached professional observation, how his fears centered more on his reputation and public judgment than on the heartbreak of infidelity itself. You're worried about being judged by your peers, by your community, Mr. Finch, she stated, her voice empathetic. You don't understand, Detective, he pleaded, his voice cracking. Where I work, weakness is like blood in the water. They'd tear me apart. Later, when Arthur had finally left, emotionally drained, Leo walked back into the interrogation room, looking genuinely impressed. How on earth did you manage to get all that out of him, Tess? Just a little patience, Leo, Tess said, a smug, satisfied smile playing on her lips. Fantastic work, Tess. But you realize you just handed us another possible suspect, don't you? Leo frowned, suddenly serious. You're not serious, are you? Tess held his gaze. Think about it, Leo. He's absolutely obsessed with his public image, with how he's perceived. Alara threatened to publicly destroy that image. That's a powerful, tangible motive, wouldn't you agree? Damn it, Tess muttered, running a hand over her face. Back home, Serafina stared Arthur down, her eyes narrowed, filled with cold accusation. You told them, didn't you? You told the police everything. He avoided her gaze, unable to meet her furious stare. They already knew most of it, Serafina, he mumbled weakly. And she said they try to keep it quiet, that they be discreet. Serafina exploded, her voice rising in a furious shriek. Try doesn't mean anything, Arthur. Absolutely nothing. She stormed off, slamming the bedroom door shut with a resounding bang, and immediately called Julian. They got to Arthur, she blurted out, her voice frantic, barely coherent. He told them absolutely everything. If the school administration finds out, Julian, we are completely screwed. Before Julian could even respond, a second call illuminated her phone screen, a harsh, intrusive light. Damn it, Julian, it's the police again, she hissed. I have to take this. She hung up on him, taking a shaky breath, preparing herself for the next round of interrogation. Tess watched from behind the one-way glass as Leo stepped into the interrogation room with Serafina Thorne. His expression was all business, his face grim. "Mrs. Thorne, your husband's account of events doesn't quite match what you told us earlier, does it?" Leo stated flatly, his voice devoid of accusation, simply stating a fact. Serafina looked visibly strained, her composure fraying. "Detective, my marriage is on incredibly shaky ground right now. I wasn't exactly eager to spill every painful, humiliating detail to strangers." Leo didn't bite, his expression remaining impassive. "Let's focus on Alara Vance, Mrs. Thorne. It sounded like things got quite intense in your living room yesterday evening." Serafina swallowed hard, her throat bobbing. "It was terrifying, detective. Absolutely terrifying." She snapped, she was shouting, making all sorts of wild accusations, completely unhinged. "What precisely did she say, Mrs. Thorne?" Leo pressed, his voice low and insistent. "She called me every name in the book," Serafina admitted, lowering her eyes, a flush of shame rising to her cheeks. And I probably earned some of it, I suppose." "Is that bruise on your cheek from her, Mrs. Thorne?" Harry asked, his gaze fixed on the visible discoloration. Serafina's face tightened, her jaw clenching. "She hit me out of nowhere, just completely attacked me, knocked me down. I was so furious, detective. I wanted to—" She stopped herself abruptly, her voice trailing off. Leo leaned in, his voice a quiet, persuasive murmur. "She threatened you, didn't she, Mrs. Thorne? She threatened your career, didn't she?" Serafina hesitated, then nodded almost imperceptibly. "She said she'd completely destroy our careers. Said we'd never work in education ever again." "And did you believe her, Mrs. Thorne?" Leo asked. "I've never, ever seen someone so utterly determined to burn it all down," Serafina said softly, her voice still trembling. "Do you own a firearm, Mrs. Thorne?" Leo asked calmly, his tone shifting. "Yes," she replied, her voice firmer now. "For protection. My father gave it to me years ago." Leo's voice dropped, becoming grave. "Did you liquidate Alara Vance with it, Mrs. Thorne?" Serafina's carefully constructed composure finally cracked, tears springing to her eyes. "No, I swear to you, detective, I couldn't do that. I'm incapable of such a thing." "Where is this magnum now, Mrs. Thorne?" Leo asked, his gaze unwavering. It should be in my nightstand drawer in the bedroom," she stammered, her voice thick with panic. Leo nodded. "We'll follow you home and conduct a thorough check." As they got back into the car, Tess glanced at her partner with a wry, knowing smile. "Nice work, Leo. Too bad you just handed us suspect number 3 on a silver platter." Leo sighed, running a hand over his face. "Yeah, figures. This case just keeps getting more complicated." Arthur was caught entirely off guard when his front door suddenly opened. Serafina walked in, her face still pale and drawn, trailed closely by Leo and Tess. She didn't utter a single word as they all moved directly towards the bedroom. "There," she paused, pointing a trembling finger at the nightstand beside the bed. "It should be inside that top drawer," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Don't touch it, Mrs. Thorne," Leo warned, pulling on a pair of latex gloves with practiced ease. He slowly opened the drawer. It was empty. Serafina rushed forward, her eyes wide with disbelief and panic. "What? That's impossible. It has to be there." She spun to face Arthur, her eyes blazing with accusation. "Arthur, did you take my magnum?" He looked utterly stunned, his jaw slack. "No, of course not. I never, ever touch your personal belongings, Serafina. You know that." Serafina turned back to the detectives, her panic escalating. "Someone took it. I swear to you it was there just yesterday." They asked for details, pressing her on the last time she had definitively seen it when it was last used. Arthur quietly backed out of the room, his mind reeling, whispering to himself. They think Serafina was the one who did it. They actually think she's the killer. That evening, Tess answered her apartment door to find Leo standing there, holding a formidable stack of case files under his arm. "You're late, Detective Sterling," she said, waving him in with a faint smile. "Paperwork," he replied with a groan, trudging in. "Grabbed a sad sandwich on my desk. This case is a beast." She handed him a cold beer, and they settled onto the comfortable living room couch. "So," she asked, taking a sip of her own drink, "what do you make of this whole messy situation now, Leo?" Leo took a long drink, still leaning towards Julian Blackwood as the primary suspect, but he conceded, "It's not as clear-cut as I initially thought. Alara Vance must have been an absolute nightmare to deal with, a truly toxic personality. She was completely out of control by the end," Tess agreed, recalling Serafina's harrowing account. "No one blames her for being angry, but she went way too far with her threats." "All right," Leo said, ticking off the growing list of suspects with his fingers. 1. Julian Blackwood. Obvious motive. Impending divorce would have financially ruined him, and Alara had the power, as a prominent state employee, to get him fired to destroy his career. 2. Tess added, raising a second finger. Serafina Thorne. Same motive. Fear of scandal, losing her teaching career, and perhaps a desperate love for Julian. Plus, she emphasized, she had a Magnum revolver, which is now conveniently missing. And Alara was shot more than once, including in the pelvis. Tess pointed out, her voice grim. "That's not just self-defense, Leo. That's pure, unadulterated rage. A personal vendetta." "Exactly," Leo nodded, his expression serious. After everything Alara did to both of them, they each had compelling reasons to hate her, to want her gone. Tess stared into her drink, the ice clinking softly. "Too many plausible motives, not enough definitive answers, Leo." Leo then raised his third finger. "And then there's Arthur Finch. Honestly, he might have had the most to lose. That man is pathologically obsessed with how people perceive him with his public image. And Alara? She was explicitly threatening to publicly humiliate him, to drag his name through the mud for all to see." Tess nodded slowly. "Yeah, in the interview, it sounded like he'd do absolutely anything to protect his meticulously crafted image. His entire identity is tied to it." Leo leaned back, finishing his beer in one long gulp. "You know what the most dangerous animal in the world is, Tess?" He mused, his voice thoughtful. "The one that's cornered with nowhere left to go. That's when it lashes out with everything it has." Tess looked thoughtful, the truth of his words sinking in. "Problem is, Leo," she said, her voice quiet. "Alara backed all three of them, Arthur, Serafina, and Julian, into a corner. We just don't know which one snapped first, which one broke under the pressure." A long, comfortable pause settled between them, the weight of the case lingering in the air. Then Tess kicked off her shoes and stretched out languidly on the couch, letting out a soft groan. "Hey, Leo, my feet are absolutely killing me. Be a decent human being and rub them for me, will you?" Leo rolled his eyes dramatically, but a small smile played on his lips. He moved closer and began to gently massage her tired feet. Tess let out a satisfied sigh, her body relaxing into the cushions. "That," she murmured, her voice laced with affection, "is literally the only reason I keep you around, Detective Sterling." After a few moments, the atmosphere between them subtly shifted, the light, teasing banter giving way to something far more intimate, a deeper undercurrent of shared comfort and undeniable affection. They ended up closer together on the couch, tangled in a shared tension and quiet contentment, a moment that had clearly been building between them for a long, unspoken while. Afterward, Tess playfully shoved him. "All right, move it, Sterling. You're crushing me now." Leo groaned theatrically, pulling himself up, though with obvious reluctance. "Can't I just crash here tonight, Tess? Just this once." "You know the rules, Leo," she said, slipping into a soft silk robe. "We both show up at work in the morning, and someone sees both our cars parked out front. We'll be reassigned to desk duty faster than you can say departmental scandal." He muttered under his breath as he dressed, a wry grin on his face. "Yeah, it's still a pain in the ass." "Then don't come back," she smirked, teasing him. "You wish, Miller," he said, tugging on his jacket. When they walked into the precinct the next day, the desk sergeant immediately flagged them down, his expression excited. "Detectives, you're going to want to hear this right away. Last night, a trash truck was picking up a dumpster near the Zenith Heights construction site, just 2 blocks from the Blackwood place. The load shifted inside the truck, and something in there went off, a loud bang. Freaked the driver out totally." Leo raised his eyebrows, a spark of interest in his eyes. "A Magnum just fired inside a dumpster, you say?" "Yep. Once they got it back to the lot, one of the sanitation guys found a Glock inside. Ballistics is already testing it as we speak." Just then, a lab technician rushed over, waving a printout excitedly. "Detectives, we got a match. Looks like this Magnum is the one that liquidated Alara Vance." "Prince?" Leo asked eagerly, his heart quickening. "No usable ones, detective," the tech said, a note of disappointment in his voice. "Too much grime and refuse from the dumpster. And the guy who found it handled it quite a bit, smearing any potential prints." At their desks, Tess leaned back in her chair, a smug expression on her face. "So, still feeling so confident about your husband theory now, Leo? This seems to point pretty squarely at Seraphina Thorne, her Magnum, after all." Leo shook his head, a thoughtful frown on his face. "Not so fast, Tess. Her husband, Arthur, could have easily taken it. That would give him both the murder weapon and a convenient alibi. Hell, even Julian knew about it. They all did." Tess frowned, acknowledging the unsettling truth. Right. Anyone who had recently been to their house could have potentially grabbed it. Just having a Magnum doesn't definitively prove who actually used it. Leo groaned, running a hand over his face in frustration. 3 strong suspects, all with compelling motives. We've got the murder weapon, but absolutely no way to tie it definitively to any one of them. Tess gave him a teasing grin, sensing his rising frustration. "You're sounding a little vexed, Leo. Is this case getting to you?" "This case is like bobbing for apples, Tess," he grumbled, leaning back in his chair. "Every time you reach for the truth, it just slips away, right through your fingers." She burst out laughing, a genuine, uninhibited sound. "Seriously, bobbing for apples? Is that your new metaphor?" "Hey," he shrugged defensively. "You remember Halloween as a kid, right? It was a thing, a challenging, messy thing." She shook her head, still chuckling softly. "You're definitely getting old, partner." He scowled good-naturedly. "Yeah, laugh it up, numbskull." Leo and Tess were slogging through yet another mountain of seemingly endless paperwork when their captain, Captain Albright, stormed over to their shared desk space. "How's the Blackwood case coming along?" he barked, his face red with impatience. "I'm catching a lot of heat from upstairs. We need an arrest, and we need it fast, detectives." Tess stood to meet his demanding glare, her posture composed and confident. She possessed an uncanny knack for handling brass far better than Leo did. "We're closing in, Captain," she said calmly, her voice steady. "We have 3 strong suspects, and we're just working to narrow it down to the perpetrator." The captain remained far from satisfied. "A prominent state employee gets taken out in her own home, and all you 2 have is a list of names? The public wants answers, and I want progress now, detectives. Immediate progress. He turned sharply on his heel and strode away, leaving a lingering aura of frustration. Leo muttered under his breath, "What does he want, Tess? Us to beat confessions out of them in the interrogation room?" Tess shook her head, her brow furrowed in deep thought. "No, Leo, we must be missing something crucial. There's a piece of the puzzle we haven't found yet." Leo pushed away from his desk, a sudden surge of inspiration hitting him. "One thing's for sure, Tess. More paperwork isn't going to solve this. Let's go check out where Alara worked. Ironwood Penitentiary. Maybe something there, some small detail, will give us the lead we desperately need." Tess frowned, skepticism etched on her face. "You honestly think that will help us, Leo? A prison? No idea," he admitted, shrugging his shoulders. "But it's the one angle we haven't truly explored yet. We're running out of options here." They drove to the imposing prison in silence, the weight of the unsolved case heavy between them. Tess remained profoundly skeptical. Alara was the head nurse, Leo. So what? How is that going to crack this case? Leo shrugged again, a familiar gesture. "Can't hurt to ask around, can it?" At the prison yard, a few inmates heckled Tess as they passed, their catcalls echoing off the concrete walls. One inmate, a grizzled veteran, recognized Leo. "Hey, Detective Sterling, you're the cop who put me in here, aren't you?" Leo grinned, a flash of his old charm. "Nice to see you're still enjoying your time behind bars, buddy." Inside, the warden greeted them warmly, his face somber. "Alara Vance's death shook us all here at Ironwood. She was tough, yes, but she was always fair. Most inmates, even the notorious troublemakers, respected her, oddly enough. Was there anyone in particular she was close to here?" Leo asked, his gaze sweeping the warden's office. The warden pointed them towards Officer Flynn, a young, earnest guard who had worked closely with Alara on many shifts. Tess tried to pull Leo away, insisting it was a dead end, a waste of precious time, but he pressed on, determined to follow every possible lead. Officer Flynn looked barely older than some of the inmates he guarded, and he clearly took Alara's death hard, his eyes still red-rimmed. She truly looked out for those guys, detectives, more than they probably deserved, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Most of them respected her, but not all of them. Was there anyone who gave her particular trouble, officer? Leo asked, sensing a thread. There was one detective, Mateo Sanchez. He never said much, but the way he looked at her, it was pure, simmering hate. It always made me nervous, genuinely. But Nurse Vance always just brushed it off, said she could handle him. Is he still here? Leo asked, his heart beginning to pound with a new theory. Nope, Officer Flynn replied, shaking his head. Released 2 days ago. His sentence was up. That single piece of information changed everything. Back in the car, Tess immediately called the parole office. Within minutes, she had an update, her voice sharp with revelation. Leo, Mateo Sanchez, didn't report in for his parole check-in. He's in violation. He's a flight risk. Leo started the engine, his expression grim and determined. Let's go visit his mother, Tess. He's bound to be there. At a worn-down, dilapidated house in a neglected part of the city, a tired, anxious woman cautiously opened the door, her eyes wary. Ma'am, we're detectives Harding and Miller, and we're looking for Mateo Sanchez, Tess said, her voice gentle but firm. The woman's eyes immediately welled up with tears. He's in the basement, detectives, she whispered, her voice cracking. Says he's dying. Won't come out, won't eat. He's been like this since he got out of Ironwood. Mind if we speak to him, ma'am? Leo asked, his hand resting reassuringly on his holster. She stepped aside, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Please, detectives, just don't hurt him. He's my baby boy. He's all I have left." Leo and Tess descended the creaking wooden stairs carefully, their hands instinctively hovering near their holsters, their senses on high alert. The basement reeked of mold, decay, and a pervasive, lingering dampness. In the deepest shadows, a curled-up shape lay motionless on a makeshift cot. "Mateo," Leo said gently, his voice low and calm, trying to sound as unthreatening as possible. "We're not here to hurt you, son. We just want to talk." When Mateo Sanchez dimly perceived the detective's figures in the dim, oppressive basement light, he attempted to sit up, a desperate, reflexive movement, then immediately collapsed back onto the cot with a pained groan, clutching his stomach. Tess quickly scanned the immediate area for any potential weapons or tools. Nothing. Leo subtly motioned for her to skip the handcuffs for now. He sensed something else was at play here. "What's going on, Mateo?" Leo asked gently, his voice laced with genuine concern. Tears streamed freely down Mateo's face, his body trembling with what appeared to be profound fear and pain. She poisoned me, detective," he sobbed, his voice ragged. "Nurse Vance. She said she'd only give you the antidote if I did exactly what she wanted. I didn't have any choice, sir. I had to do it. And then she lied. There was no antidote. I'm going to die. I know it." Leo frowned, his expression hardening as the implications sank in. "Mateo, what exactly did she make you do?" Mateo looked up, his eyes wide and vacant. She made me liquidate her, detective. She made me kill her." Tess kept her voice steady, though a chill ran down her spine. "Is that why you shot her, Mateo? Because you hated her so much?" "I didn't want to," Mateo sobbed, the words tumbling out in a rush. "She made me do awful, unspeakable things back at the prison, detective. I hated her, sure, but I just wanted to leave it all behind, to forget everything and start fresh. She wouldn't let me. She wouldn't let me go." Back at the station, Mateo Sanchez, still convinced he was dying, refused legal counsel, repeatedly muttering, "It doesn't matter. I'm dead anyway. What's the point?" Tess briefed the captain, her voice tight with a mixture of disbelief and grim fascination. "Captain, you won't believe this one. Mateo Sanchez claims Alara Vance effectively ran parts of Ironwood Penitentiary through a system of pure fear and absolute control. He says she rewarded some inmates with illicit pills and drugs, while threatening others, including him, with poison during their medical visits." Tess explained, her voice gaining momentum. She used the prison's flu injections, regular insulin doses, anything that could be administered as a tool to intimidate and manipulate prisoners. In Mateo's specific case, it was his daily insulin injection. She reportedly told him she had given him a slow-acting poison on the very day he was released, claiming he would die within a week unless he followed her precise orders. "And her order?" the captain asked, utterly incredulous, leaning forward, "was to murder her? To kill Alara Vance?" Tess nodded grimly. "Apparently, yes, Captain. It appears she was severely unraveling, mentally. Her husband, Julian, was leaving her, and she feared she'd completely lose her mind, just like her mother had, and just like her sister, Lydia, had after their mother's death. Instead of ending her own life, she meticulously set up a murder that would, in her deranged mind, ruin the lives of everyone who had, in her perception, betrayed her." Tess continued. After he pulled the trigger on her, Mateo frantically searched her purse, desperate for the promised antidote. There was nothing there. In a surge of sheer panic and desperation, believing he was doomed, he kept firing, emptying the clip into her body. The captain leaned back, skepticism etched deeply on his stone-faced expression. "Even if any of that insane story is true, detectives, A jury will never, ever buy it. All we have is the word of a single inmate, a man who claims he was poisoned. Where is Mateo Sanchez now? Tess sighed, her shoulders slumping. He's getting checked out at the city hospital, Captain. The doctor there says there's no trace of any poison in his system. Nothing at all. It appears Alara Vance manipulated him to the very end, playing on his fears, even after her death. Well, the captain said, his voice devoid of sympathy, unless you two find some hard, tangible evidence to corroborate his wild story, the district attorney is charging him with first-degree murder. Case closed. Tess stormed back to her desk, her hands clenched into fists. We are not letting that kid take the fall for her twisted, deranged revenge, Leo, she snapped, her voice filled with a fierce determination. Leo looked up, startled by her intensity. Where are we going, Tess? Back to the prison, she declared, rising from her chair. To find what, exactly, he asked, still bewildered. I'll know when I see it, she replied, her eyes burning with resolve. The prison yard was eerily quiet this time, a stark contrast to their previous visit. The warden looked genuinely surprised by their swift return. We'd like to conduct a thorough check of Alara Vance's workspace, Warden, Tess stated, her voice firm. He led them to the infirmary, a modest, clinical room containing a metal exam table, a few chairs, a standard desk, and a small, locked mini-fridge. A basic medicine cabinet hung securely over the sink. A file cabinet and a locked utility closet stood in one corner. Want to get the keys for the locked areas, detectives? Leo asked, offering to help. No, Tess said, shaking her head. She wouldn't leave anything obvious lying around. Not Alara Vance. She began by meticulously opening the desk drawers, rifling through stacks of official papers and patient records. Then, she crouched down, running her hands along the inside of the drawers, tapping for any hidden compartments or false bottoms. Still coming up empty, Tess stood, turning her attention to the wall cabinet above the sink. She opened it. It held a conventional mix of basic medications, some gauze, sterile wipes, and, oddly enough, several brightly colored, rather flashy makeup items. Tess frowned, eyeing them suspiciously. Pretty flashy, she muttered, a puzzled expression on her face. Doesn't seem like her typical vibe, does it? After closing the cabinet, she slowly paced the small room, her fingers trailing along the walls, listening intently for any hollow sounds that might indicate a hidden space. With nothing turning up, she turned to Leo, who had been watching her with a slightly amused, curious expression. Suddenly, a spark ignited in her eyes, a flash of realization. Leo, she said, her voice urgent, if you're searching for hidden pills in someone's home, where do you typically start looking? What's the first place you check? He looked momentarily confused by the seemingly random question, but quickly answered, the bedroom, usually. People like to keep that stuff close, readily accessible. Exactly, Tess exclaimed, her eyes gleaming with triumph. She stepped back to the medicine cabinet. Grabbing both sides firmly, she yanked hard, putting all her strength into it. Hey, don't destroy the place, Tess, Leo said, alarmed by her sudden, forceful action. She gave another powerful pull, and with a scraping groan of metal against wood, the entire cabinet slid free of the wall, revealing a shallow, concealed space behind it. Oh my God, Leo, she whispered, her voice filled with awe and disbelief. Leo, check this out. You will not believe this. Inside, neatly arranged, were rows of narcotics, various pills and unmarked vials, small bags of what appear to be weed, and numerous injectables. Leo's eyes quickly scanned the labels. Painkillers, cocaine, stimulants, sedatives, everything. But Tess was focused on something else entirely. A a slim, metal box securely mounted to the back of the hidden compartment. "What's that?" Leo asked, his voice hushed. Tess carefully unlatched it. Inside was a small, sleek tablet. "I bet this is Alara Vance's personal log," she said, her voice vibrating with excitement and a grim sense of victory. They sat at the desk, the tablet resting between them, and powered it up. It loaded to a long list of video folders, meticulously marked by date, organized chronologically. Tess opened one of the earliest folders. Alara Vance's face filled the screen, looking calm, professional, talking about her work at Ironwood Penitentiary with a serene, almost detached air. They skipped ahead, fast-forwarding through weeks, then months of recordings. Now Alara looked harsher, her eyes colder, her tone bitter, brittle. "Those boys here need to learn some fundamental respect," she snapped into the lens, her voice sharp. "And I think I know precisely how to make them behave, how to break them into submission." Another clip played. This time, Alara giggled, a chilling, unsettling sound, while recording a note to herself. "Joey was absolutely thrilled when I gave him the X today. Too bad I won't be here to see what he does with it tonight." Tess clicked to open another, more recent folder, but Leo stopped her, his hand on her arm. "Try a recent one, Tess. From this year, maybe." She found one from earlier this year, dated just a few months prior. The camera was set on the desk, aimed directly at the exam table. A young man was lying face down, bent over the table, his bare back exposed. His face was grotesquely made up with heavy red lipstick, thick, smudged eyeliner, and excessive blush, clearly intended to make him look like a girl. Then, Alara appeared on screen, wearing a leather harness, her chest exposed, a disturbing, almost predatory gleam in her eyes. What captured Tess's attention most was the large, ominous strap-on attached to her waist. She walked over and touched the man's bare backside with the strap-on. He flinched violently, a visible spasm of fear. "You want this, pretty boy?" she purred, her voice a low, taunting growl. "No, please don't," he begged, his voice muffled by the exam table, laced with pure terror. "Please, Nurse Vance, I'll behave. I'll do anything else you want. Just not that." Leo's face went pale, his eyes wide with shock and revulsion. "That's Mateo's voice," he whispered, his voice hoarse. Alara's tone on the video turned cold, utterly devoid of empathy. "If you don't do what I say, Mateo, your next insulin dose will be your very last. Do you understand?" The young man on the table went limp with fear, his body trembling uncontrollably. "I'm done, Tess," Leo muttered, his stomach churning. He reached out and stopped the playback. Tess looked sick to her stomach, but she kept searching through the folders, grimly determined. "I want to find the one from last week." The last one she recorded. Leo nodded silently, unable to speak. "Here," Tess said, clicking a file marked last Wednesday. A new scene appeared on the tablet screen. Alara Vance's living room. "That looks like her house," Leo whispered, his voice barely audible. Alara suddenly appeared on screen, wide-eyed, twitchy, her face contorted, yelling into the lens, her voice high-pitched and frantic. Tess quickly turned the volume down, though the manic energy emanating from the screen was still palpable. "I knew this would happen. Just like it happened to Mom. Just like Lydia," she ranted, her voice cracking with despair and unhinged fury. "That bastard's leaving me. He's abandoning me. But I won't end up like Lydia. I'll die first, I swear it." Her voice cracked, her face becoming increasingly manic, distorted. "But I won't let Serafina and my dear, cheating husband get away with it. They'll pay. And Serafina's pathetic husband, too. He should have stopped it before it even started, before any of this began." She panted, her chest heaving, her eyes wild, truly unhinged now. "I can feel myself slipping away." I'm not going to live like this, but I can still make them hurt, make them suffer immensely before I go. Mateo hates me. I know he does. He'll do it. If I set it up just right, it'll look like they're the guilty ones. Mateo will suffer too. He should. The clip ended abruptly, plunging the room into a stunned silence. Tess, her hands trembling slightly, opened the next video. Alara appeared again, but this time, strangely, she was much calmer, a chilling composure settling over her. "It's ready," she said, a faint, unsettling smile playing on her lips. "Mateo looked like he wanted to liquidate me this morning, but I told him no antidote unless he plays along. And he folded like always, the poor, scared boy." Her smile widened slightly, a ghost of triumph. "I took Serafina's magnum. Her idiot husband didn't even bother to lock the side door yesterday. Now it's all in motion, just as I planned. They'll probably go to Serafina's house first to confront her. I'll be waiting for them there." Then her tone shifted again, becoming soft, almost melancholic, her eyes gazing distantly into the lens. "Mama, I'll see you soon. I don't know when. I truly don't want to, but soon we'll be together again. I miss you. I missed you for so long." They had to wait until forensics cleared the infirmary before they could finally leave Ironwood Penitentiary, the weight of what they had just witnessed pressing heavily upon them. On the ride back to the precinct, they barely spoke, each lost in their own grim thoughts. Eventually, Leo broke the silence, his voice somber. "You know what's truly tragic, Tess? Alara Vance was absolutely terrified of losing her mind, of ending up like her sister, Lydia. But the horrifying truth is she already had. She just didn't realize it herself. Roughly 2 weeks had passed since the complex case was officially closed when Tess, finishing applying her mascara in the mirror, heard the doorbell chime at her apartment. She grabbed her cardigan on her way to answer it, pulling it on, and opened the door to see Leo standing there, looking remarkably dapper in a crisp, dark suit, a vibrant bouquet of flowers in one hand, and a slightly sheepish, boyish grin on his face. "Wow, Leo, look at you," Tess said with a surprised laugh, her eyes twinkling. "That's quite the welcome party you've brought." Leo gave a mock bow, a flourish of his arm. "Hey, Tess. Leo Sterling always pays what he owes, and I distinctly recall promising you dinner, didn't I? Tonight, I deliver, and I do it with style." Tess chuckled, stepping aside to let him into her apartment. "Truthfully," she admitted, "I felt a little guilty about it, the dinner. If you hadn't dragged me out to that prison that day, we might never have cracked the case wide open." "Maybe," Leo replied, shrugging, stepping past her. "But if you hadn't uncovered that hidden nook behind the mirror, no one would have taken our wild theory seriously, would they? The husband's off the hook, and that, my dear, means dinner's unequivocally on me. Now come on. We've got reservations, and I'm not letting them go to waste." He'd managed to snag a table at the Gilded Spoon, one of the nicer, more exclusive spots in town. Nothing overtly extravagant, but classy enough to genuinely impress. Their meal was delicious, impeccably prepared. The wine flowed smoothly, its rich taste complementing the food, and for a while, they exchanged updates on their colleagues, the latest precinct drama, and other mundane, comforting topics. But then Tess grew quiet, her fingers absently circling the rim of her wine glass. "Oh, Serafina Thorne called me. By the way," she said, her voice softer now. "Wanted to make sure it was okay for her to leave town." Leo looked up from his plate, intrigued, his fork hovering. "Where's she headed, Tess?" "Back to her folks' place, I think," Tess said. "She left her teaching job and filed for divorce from Arthur. She and Arthur are finished. Completely. Is Julian going with her?" Leo asked, a hint of curiosity in his voice. She shook her head. "No, She said after everything they put people through, the guilt was too much. She just couldn't keep pretending any longer. What about Julian? Leo inquired. Julian quit his job too. I heard, Tess replied. Said he's heading west to start over completely. The gossip around Oakwood Academy never got too specific, but it was enough to spook him, I guess. Better to leave on his own terms than wait to get publicly pushed out. Leo frowned. And Arthur? What about him? Tess sighed, a deep, weary sound. Arthur vanished. Left town 3 days ago. Serafina hasn't heard from him since. I think the whole messy ordeal was just more than he could emotionally handle. He just broke. Leo sighed, leaning back in his chair. You know, Tess, even though we exposed everything, even though her twisted plan failed, it still feels like Alara Vance ultimately won in the end. Her direct plan failed, sure, but those three, Arthur, Serafina, Julian, their lives are still utterly wrecked, aren't they? Then a faint smile tugged at his mouth, a sudden shift in his mood. But get this, Tess. Did you hear what's happening with Mateo Sanchez? Tess shook her head, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. No, Leo, fill me in. What's the latest? Leo let out a soft chuckle, a sound of genuine amusement. The district attorney's office is absolutely stumped. Alara Vance's video logs blew their entire case apart. They can't charge Mateo with murder anymore. Even manslaughter is looking incredibly iffy, hard to prove. There's a distinct chance the only thing he'll eventually be charged with is illegally firing a magnum inside city limits. Good, Tess said softly, a genuine relief in her voice. He's no saint, Leo, that's for sure. But he was used, manipulated, exploited. He didn't deserve what she did to him, what she put him through. Leo nodded in agreement. Then, noticing her empty plate, he brightened considerably. Dessert? I hear the tiramisu here is legendary, absolutely divine. She gave him a mock glare, a playful glint in her eyes. What did I tell you about your sugar intake, Detective Sterling? He groaned melodramatically. You're relentless, Miller. Why are you always on my case, constantly nagging me? Because if something ever happens to you, Leo, she said with a half smile, a touch of genuine warmth entering her voice. Who else is going to put up with me, Leo? Who else will understand my quirks? He laughed, a hearty, genuine sound. But after a thoughtful pause, his tone shifted, becoming more serious, more reflective. You know, Tess, this case really stuck with me, this one. Those four, Alara, Julian, Serafina, Arthur, they were just drifting through life, weren't they? Letting everything carry them along like passive debris in a lazy river. Then one day, they simply washed up somewhere awful, somewhere terrifying, and they couldn't even figure out how they got there, how it all spiraled so catastrophically out of control. Tess gave him a sideways glance, her eyebrows raised. Wow, Leo, that's surprisingly deep for you. Are you all right? You don't think I'm right, Tess? He challenged softly. No, I get it, Leo, she said, though her voice betrayed a hint of uncertainty, a flicker of her own introspection. I guess what I'm saying is, maybe you and I are doing the exact same thing, aren't we? Just floating, waiting for life to make the next move for us. Tess narrowed her eyes, now genuinely concerned. Wait a second, Leo. Are you sick or something? Don't you dare go giving me some dramatic, existential health speech right now. Harry rolled his eyes, a familiar, exasperated gesture. No, Tess, nothing like that, honestly. I just don't want to keep coasting anymore. I want something solid, something real, with you. Then, to Tess's profound surprise, Leo pushed back his chair, the legs scraping loudly on the elegant floor, got up, and awkwardly knelt beside her at the table. Leo, what on earth are you doing? She began, her eyes wide with shock and confusion, a blush creeping up her neck. "You hard-headed woman," he said, fumbling awkwardly in his jacket pocket, a nervous laugh escaping him. "I'm trying to propose to you, Tess Miller." He pulled out a small box, a simple, elegant design, and flipped it open. Inside, nestled on a velvet cushion, was a simple yet stunning diamond ring. "It's not fancy, Tess, not overtly extravagant," he said, his voice a little shaky with emotion, "but I'm hoping it's enough. I hope it's everything you need." Tess froze, staring at him, at the ring, at the earnest, hopeful expression on his face. Then she let out a breathy, joyous laugh, got out of her chair, her dress rustling, and knelt awkwardly beside him, her eyes shining with tears. "If you're going to be down here, Leo, then I will be too," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And yes, yes, Leo Sterling, 1,000 times yes, I will absolutely marry you." She cupped his face in her hands, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw, and kissed him hard, a passionate, unrestrained kiss, as the entire restaurant erupted in a spontaneous wave of clapping and joyous cheers all around them, celebrating their unexpected, beautiful moment.